Welcome to the congregation of Yahweh. We're here on Yahweh's Sabbath day. Greetings to those on the internet. We hope you enjoy the messages that go out. Today's message is entitled Righteousness Without the Law. There is a verse in Romans chapter 3 that I want to start off with. And if we just read that one verse and close the book, we can make up all kinds of fancy interpretations that doesn't go along with the context of the rest of Scripture. In chapter 3, verse 21, it says, "But now the righteousness of Elohim without the law is manifested, being witnessed by the law and the prophets." Now, does that mean he doesn't want us to obey him? Does that mean everything in the law was done away with? Or is it something a little deeper? Let's go back to verse 19. "Now we know that what things soever the law says, it says to them who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped, and all the world may become guilty before Elohim. Therefore by the deeds of the law there shall no flesh be justified in his sight, for by the law is the knowledge of sin." And I think a verse that goes real well with this, it says that, back there in 19, it says, "Whatsoever the law says, it says to them who are under the law." So if you're under the law, it's talking to you. So let's go to 1 Timothy and find out what that means. 1 Timothy chapter 1, starting in verse 8. "But we know that the law is good if a man use it lawfully, knowing this, that the law is not made for a righteous man, but for the lawless, the disobedient, for the wicked, for sinners, for unholy and profane, for murderers of fathers and murderers of mothers, for manslayers, for whoremongers, for them that defile themselves with mankind, for men stealers, for liars, for perjured persons, and if there be any other thing that is contrary to sound doctrine." All these things that he just named were contrary to the law. And that is the purpose of the law, to define what those things are. But it's not for a righteous man. Why? Because he's not breaking it. He's not under it. If he's breaking it, then he's condemned by it, and he's under the law. Back to Romans. Back to chapter 3. And we left off in 20, and he said it's by the law is the knowledge of sin. And I'm just going to skip ahead real quick. Look at 4. and 15. "Because the law works wrath, for where no law is, there is no transgression." Meditate on that for a minute. If there is no law, then there can't be a transgression. If there is no law, then there is no sin. We can go back to the garden. He said, "Do not eat of that tree." That was the command. If he hadn't have said, "Don't eat from the tree," and they ate from it, it wouldn't have been a sin.
Right.
It was when they transgressed the commandment that it was a sin.
Right.
But how did that happen? A seed of rebellion had to be implanted. He said, "Don't do it," and then the enemy came along and said, "You can transgress his word. It's okay. You can break the commandment. Now I'm going to make it a little more exciting for you. It's going to make you wise. He's holding something back from you. You'll be like him if you eat it. You'll be great. You'll be mighty. It'll be good if you transgress." And that's the rebellion that all mankind is in. It's not the commandment, it's the desire to break it. The rebellion ingrained in the flesh that wants to rebel. And that's the part of us. That's what the rest of Romans is all about. Trying to get rid of that old man that has a craving to rebel against the commandments. The commandments are not the problem. It's us. We're the problem. And that's what he came to restore. A desire to do the right thing. A peculiar people, zealous of good works. Zealous to do the right thing. Well, how do you know what the wrong thing is? It's defined in Scripture. That's the only way to know right from wrong is what was already written. So why do away with what was already written when he said it was perfect? Don't add to it. Don't take from it. But instead, all the doctrines of man want to do away with his perfect word that endures forever. Continuing on, verse 21, but now the righteousness of Elohim without the law is manifest, being witnessed by the law and the prophets, even the righteousness of Elohim, which is by faith of Yeshua Messiah, unto all and upon all them that believe, for there is no difference. Now this righteousness of Elohim by faith in Yeshua means right standing, innocence, rendered as just, and it's by faith in what he did. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of Elohim. Being justified, that word comes from the same word as righteousness, rendered as innocent, freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Messiah Yeshua. That word redemption is a ransom paid in full. It's a combination of two different words. So you are made innocent by the ransom paid in full by the Messiah. That means that he wiped your slate clean. And once he did that, guess what? Go and sin no more. The sins that are past, Romans talks about, have been done away. Now keep your slate clean. Continue a life of repentance and go find out how he wants you to live. It's not you have been rendered innocent, now go live how you want to. You have been rendered innocent, now don't go back to the way you used to live. Being justified, rendered innocent, freely by the ransom that has been paid in the Messiah Yeshua, whom Elohim hath set forth to be a propitiation, that's an atoning victim, through the faith in his blood. Faith in his blood, what he did is the ransom that was paid. And that is why you're rendered innocent. Now, don't go back and do the things that he died for in the first place. To declare his righteousness for the remission of sins that are past. That was the verse. Through the forbearance of Elohim. To declare, I say, at this time, his righteousness, that he might be just and the justifier of him which believed in Yeshua. Where is the boasting then? It is excluded. By what law? Of works? Nay, but by the law of faith. Therefore we conclude that a man is justified by faith without the deeds of the law. Now, we can hear all kinds of confusing doctrines out there and use verses like this to just do away, push away with the law. But all he's trying to come across here is saying your justification did not come by anything that you can do. You can't earn it. It's a free gift. You didn't, and the reason he's going through all this is there were some Judaizers out there. Acts chapter 15 and the whole book of Galatians, there were people, when they saw the conversion of the nations, they said, whoa, they need to be circumcised, they need to keep all the law and keep the customs and the traditions, and then we might let them in. And he said, no. They heard the word. They believed. The Spirit was poured out on them. And they didn't have to do anything to get that Spirit. So why are you trying to put that yoke of being saved by the law on them first? Give them a little grace. And Acts talked about, they need to put aside these 4 detestable things first, but then they'll learn the rest on the Sabbath from Moses. That's Acts 15. Continue on. Is he the Elohim of the Jews only? Is he not also of the Gentiles? Yea, of the Gentiles also. Seeing it is one Elohim, which shall justify the circumcision by faith, and the uncircumcision through faith. Now, if you want to use anything in that chapter to do away with his perfect word, read the next verse. Do we then make void the law through faith? Do we do away with it because of our faith? Because we're justified by our faith, do we just make the rest of that stuff obsolete? Certainly not. We establish it. We cause it to stand. I assume that the word void and establish are complete opposites. Are you going to do away with it, or are you going to make it stand? And it's plain and simple. You make it to stand. And it's not the source. The law is not the source of your righteousness, but it is what will follow after you've been made right. Because that Spirit of truth is going to guide you to the truth, help you understand the truth, empower you to obey the truth. That's what the new covenant is all about. Continue on to chapter 4. What shall we say then that Abraham our father has pertained to the flesh hath found? For if Abraham were justified by works, he hath whereof to glory, but not before Elohim. For what says the Scripture? Abraham believed Elohim, and it was counted unto him for righteousness. Now to him that works is the reward not reckoned of grace, but of debt. But to him that worketh not, but believes on him that justifies the wicked, his faith is counted for righteousness. Now, with these two verses, verse 4 and verse 5, someone in the mainstream might say, well, this person is trying to be obedient. So he's putting Yahweh in debt. He thinks he's going to earn it. And then in verse 5 says, him that works not. They might say, oh, well, this is a person that doesn't have to keep the law. No. Let me give you a good illustration of to him that works. In Romans chapter 9, and verse 32. Sorry, Joel, let's back it up to verse 31. But Israel, which followed after the law of righteousness, hath not attained to the law of righteousness. Wherefore? Why? Because they sought it not by faith, but as it were by the works of the law. For they stumbled at the stumbling stone. Not only trying to earn your righteousness through your actions, but adding all kinds of taxing traditions and just surrounding the law with laws of your own, it became a huge stumbling block. Back to chapter 4. So if you think you can do it by your works of the law, if you think that's where your righteousness comes from, then you're putting him in debt. You're saying he owes you something. But in verse 5, when it says to him that works not, that means a person that's not trying to earn it by their actions through the law. But he believes on him that justifies the wicked. And believing that the Messiah's atonement is what does it, that is what makes it accounted to you for righteousness. Let's skip down to verse 9. Comes this blessedness then upon the circumcision only, or upon the uncircumcision also? For we say that faith was reckoned to Abraham for righteousness. How was it then reckoned? When he was in circumcision or in uncircumcision? Not in circumcision, but in uncircumcision. Meaning, Abraham was a righteous man before he was circumcised in his flesh. And he received the sign of circumcision, a mark, a seal of the righteousness of the faith which he had, yet being uncircumcised. So he got a sign in his flesh as a sign of his righteousness that he had before he was circumcised. Why? That he might be the father of all. He said, I will make you the father of many nations, many Gentiles, many Goyim. The father of all them that believe, though they be not circumcised, that righteousness might be imputed unto them also. How? By faith. And the father of circumcision to them who are not of the circumcision only, but who also walk in the steps of that faith of our father Abraham. And it shows that he had a walk of faith. And if you go back and read the story of Abraham, you'll realize that it wasn't just a mental thing. He walked it out. And the end result was obedience, which he had being yet uncircumcised. For the promise that he should be the heir of the world was not to Abraham or to his seed through the law, but through the righteousness of faith. For if they which are of the law be heirs, faith is made void, and the promise made of none effect. Because the law works wrath. For where no law is, there is no transgression. Therefore it is of faith, that it might be by grace, to the end the promise might be sure to all the seed, not to that only which is of the law, but to that also which is of the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all. As it is written, I have made thee a father of many nations, before him whom he believed, even Elohim, who quickens the dead, and calls those things which be not as though they were. Let me skip down to 19. And being not weak in faith, he considered not his own body now dead, when he was about 100 years old, neither yet the deadness of Sarah's womb. He staggered not at the promise. He's explaining how this righteousness was actually imputed, because he believed what was told to him. He staggered not at the promise of Elohim through unbelief, but was strong in faith, giving glory to Elohim, and being fully persuaded that what he had promised, he was able also to perform. And therefore it was imputed to him for righteousness. How? Being fully persuaded that what he said was going to happen, that his word was good. Now it was not written for his sake alone that it was imputed to him, but for us also, to whom it shall be imputed, if we believe on him that raised up Yeshua our Master from the dead, who was delivered for our offenses and was raised again for our justification, innocence. So in the same way, Abraham believed what Yahweh said, that it was going to happen. We believe that what Yeshua did, and that we will be raised and justified. Let me skip over to chapter 6. Chapter 6 goes into great detail. My favorite chapters in the Bible, 6, 7, and 8, by far, are in Romans. And it is just so deep and profound, and I learn something new from it every time. But he goes into great detail to explain what it means to not be under the law. You know, the mainstream teaches if you're not under the law, you don't need to obey it. It's obsolete. But that's not what he's saying. What shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? With the definition of sin in mind, sin is transgression. Without the law, there is no sin, so we know what law is. We know what sin is. Certainly not. How shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein? Know you not that so many of us as were baptized into Yeshua Messiah were baptized into his death? Therefore we are buried with him by baptism into his death, that like as Messiah was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. In the same way he went down into the grave, we're supposed to be dead with him. Right. And in the same way he raised, we're supposed to be alive with him. But Paul is showing, he's about to show, that there's a part of us that needs to die. And that's the part that's under the law. It's the part of us that he named over there in Timothy. The murderers, the whoremongers, the liars, all that. That's the part that's under the law that needs to die. That's the part that needs to go down into the grave with the Messiah. Right. And the new man that raises is the one that's not under the law because he's not breaking it. Therefore, verse 5, for if we have been planted together in the likeness of his death, we shall be also in the likeness of his resurrection, knowing this, that our old man is impaled or crucified with him. Why? That the body of sin might be destroyed, the man you used to be. Why? So that henceforth we should not be slaves of sin. For he that is dead, that's the old man, is freed from sin. What is sin? Transgression. If you've been truly dead, then you're free from transgression. Now, that should ring a bell, that word free. And being freed from sin. The Messiah said, if you continue in my word, you'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free. They said, well, we're Abraham's seed. We're not slaves to anybody. He said, he that sins is a slave of sin. So if you continue in the word, it will set you free from a life of sin. Why? Because knowing the word, thy word have I hid in my heart, that I might not sin against thee. If you meditate on this word continually, when the enemy comes along and wants you to transgress, that word is right there to say, Verse 8, now if we be dead with the Messiah, we believe that we shall also live with him. I'm just going to skip through a few verses here. In verse 11, likewise reckon you also yourselves to be dead indeed to sin. Look at verse 16. Know you not that to whom you yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants you are, to whom you obey, whether of sin unto death or of obedience unto righteousness. This whole chapter 6, is talking about a part of man dying, being put to death. Now, let's go to chapter 7, and he goes into a little bit more detail about what happens when the old man dies. Know you not, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law, how that the law has dominion over a man as long as he lives. Selah. Think about that. People that have knowledge of the law, people that know it, they know that as long as a man is alive, it has dominion over him. For the woman which has a husband is bound by the law to her husband, so long as he lives. But if the husband be dead, she is loosed from the law of her husband. So then if while her husband lives she be married to another man, she should be called an adulteress. But if her husband be dead, she is freed from that law, so that she is no adulteress, though she be married to another man. Meaning, as long as he's alive, she's bound to that law. But if he's dead, that law does not apply. Wherefore, my brethren, you also are become dead to the law by the body of Messiah, that you should be married to another, even to him who is raised from the dead. There is a part of you that had to die so you could be married to him. That you should be married to another, even to him who raised from the dead, that we should bring forth fruit unto Elohim. For when we were in the flesh, he's about to talk about that old man and the battle that we go through. For when we were in the flesh, the motions of sin which were by the law did work in our members to bring forth fruit unto death. That word means the passion to sin was by the law. Now, some like to say this is the law of sin and death. I don't agree. I don't think he's switching up the context here. The passion to sin comes through the law. We discussed that. Go back to the garden. The law said don't do it. A seed of rebellion came and there was a passion to go against the commandment, naturally. And he continues that several times in this chapter. We'll go on. But now we are delivered from the law. that being dead wherein we were held, that we should serve in newness of spirit and not in oldness of letter. What held us? The passion of sin held us. That's what we're being delivered from. What shall we say then? Is the law sin? Certainly not. Nay, I had not known sin but by the law. For I had not known lust, except the law had said, Thou shalt not covet. Here it goes again. But sin taking occasion by the commandment wrought in me all manner of concupiscence, for without the law sin was dead. If there is no law, there is no sin, and there's no desire to sin. For I was alive without the law once, but when the commandment came, sin revived, and I died. I think that is best summed up in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, where he says that there's a veil over their hearts. But when the heart turns to the Master, the veil is lifted. And that's what he's saying, the sin revived, and I died. And the commandment which was ordained to life I found to be unto death. Why? Because it points out sin. For sin, here it goes again. For sin taking occasion by the commandment deceived me, and by it slew me. Wherefore the law is holy, the commandment holy and just and good. There's a verse over here in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. I'm going to read that real quick. And I think it goes along with, there's a passion, there's a craving that comes through the law. We have a rebellious nature in us, and it has a desire to rebel. In chapter 15 and verse 56, the sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. That's where sin gets its strength from. Because if there's not a law in place, there's no natural inclination to rebel against it. That's where it gets its strength from. In verse 12, wherefore the law is holy, the commandment holy and just and good. Was then that which is good made death unto me? Certainly not. But sin, that it might appear sin, working death in me by that which is good, that sin by the commandment might become exceedingly sinful. Just showing that the purpose of the law is to point out sin. For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold under sin. And I always like to compare 8:5 with 7:14. 8:5 says, For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Spirit mind the things of the Spirit. And we know that the law is spiritual. For that which I do, I allow not. Meaning the things that I do, I tell other people not to do. For what I want, what I would, that do I not. The things that I want to do is what I'm not doing. But what I hate, that is what I do. If then I do that which I don't want to do, I consent that the law is good. As long as there are human beings on the face of this earth doing things that are wrong, it is the evidence that the law is good. And he said back here in that last verse, he says, the things that I am doing, I allow not, and the things that I want to do, the things that I don't want to do. Sorry. Yeah, the things that I want to do, I don't do. And the things that I hate, this is what I do. When I was out there in the world, doing the drugs, drinking all the time, and people question me about it, I said, I have no power over this. I hate it. It's despicable. Right. But I can't stop. I have no power over this. And I'm just using that as an analogy to the carnal nature. Sometimes human beings just do things that they don't want to do. And it's the rebellion that's in them. Now then, it is no more I that do it, but it's the sin that dwells in me. So he's saying, if I'm doing the things that I detest, it's not me, it's the sin inside of me. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwells no good thing. For to will, that means the desire is present with me, but how to perform that which is good, I find not. I have a desire to do the right thing, but I don't know how to do the right thing. I can't figure it out. For the good that I want to do, for the good that I want, I do not do, but the evil which I don't want to do, this is what I do. Now, if I do what I don't want to do, it is no more I that do it, but the sin that dwells in me. I find in a law that when I want to do good, evil is present with me. That's amazing. And that's going to be with us until the Messiah returns and restores all things. There is always going to be an evil inclination, and that's what we got to keep in check. That's the man that we got to keep in the ground. And how do you do that? Walking in the Spirit. Walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lusts of the flesh. When he has a desire to do good, evil is still present. For I delight in the law of Yahweh after the inward man, but I see another law in my members warring against the law of my mind, and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin which is in my members, in my flesh. O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of death? He's asking a question about everything he just wrote. He's saying, look at this. I'm in a battle. I can't figure it out. I am wretched. And if you do a study on that word wretched and where it came from, it's got some history behind it. But I won't repeat it right now. But he's saying, I am wretched. Who is going to deliver me from this flesh, this body of death that I'm dragging around every day? And he answers the question. I thank Elohim through Yeshua, Messiah, our Master. So then with my mind, I myself serve the law of Elohim. But what does the flesh do? The law of sin. Therefore, there is therefore now no condemnation to them which are in Messiah Yeshua. And who is that? Who's in Messiah Yeshua? Who doesn't have the condemnation? Those that walk after the Spirit and not the flesh. Not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. For the law of the Spirit of life in Messiah Yeshua hath made me free from the law of sin and death. The Spirit of life has made me free from who? That old man. The Spirit has made me free from that old man. For what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh. Galatians says if there had been a law which could have given life, then it would have been through the law. Yahweh sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and for sin, he condemned sin in the flesh. Why? Why did he condemn sin in the flesh? That the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled, might be perfected, completed in us, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is enmity against Elohim, for it is not subject to the law of Elohim, neither indeed can be. And that is the reason all those doctrines out there that tickle the ear and do away with the commandments sound so good, because the carnal mind cannot be submissive to law. Hallelujah.